All right. New episode of Jung Naiv. I have a new guest. Who are you?
My name is Omer Bartov. I'm a professor of history and of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University in the United States. I was born in Israel, lived there for the first half of my life. Since then, I've been teaching in the U.S. What else should I say? I studied the German army in my original research and then moved on to other topics.
Well, we will talk about all of that during this conversation. What brings you to Berlin or to Germany?
I'm giving several talks here.
About what? The German army?
No, about the Israeli army.
Why is that?
Well, since October 7th, I've been writing a lot on what's going on in Gaza. And I've just finished a book on that, and I wrote various essays. So people seem to want to hear what I have to say about it.
Especially in Germany or all over the world?
No, I've done a lot in the United States, Britain, a fair amount in France, and Germany. Yeah, Germany actually a bit less.
How come? And who's inviting you?
Different places. Let's see. I was yesterday in the Fritz Bauer Institute. Tomorrow there's a symposium on genocide in the Humboldt Universität. On Thursday I'm talking at the How, which you probably know. I've not been there. But, on Friday I'm speaking in Hamburg at an institute there. So yeah, several.
Do they invite you to talk about genocide, what's happening in Gaza?
Yes.
Because like in Germany, it's a very hot topic, especially when it comes to the word.
That's the reason that I think. I mean, I've done interviews here, you probably know, with some newspapers over the last 2 years. Yeah. But relatively, I think there's been, maybe less so now, but certainly in the early months or first year, there's been great reluctance in Germany to speak critically of Israel.
I saw that you were also reluctant when it came to the word genocide, when it came to Gaza.
I would say reluctant. I don't think that's the right term. I was cautious.
Yeah.
And I was cautious because, first of all, because genocide is a very heavy word. And you shouldn't use it unless you're sure that that is what you're seeing. And it's often used as a term of outrage. And it has been used as such, including against Israel in the past. And so I did not want to say genocide before I was sure it was. But already 4 weeks after the war began, I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and I said there that if this is not stopped, it may become genocide. So I was worried about it almost from the very beginning. But I waited until, to my mind at least, on the evidence that I could get. Obviously, I was not in Gaza. I became convinced that there was no way to deny that it was what it was.
Why can't you deny it?
You can't deny it. Well, I mean, now it's very hard to deny it, extremely hard. In fact, there are hardly any specialists in genocide studies or in international law who would deny it. But I came to that conclusion in May, June of 2024. And at the time, it appeared to me you couldn't deny it anymore because what the IDF was doing was not following the official war goals that the Israeli government had proclaimed, which were to destroy Hamas and to release the hostages, but rather it was actually acting in conformity with statements that were made right after October 7th by a whole list of politicians and military men, which had clear genocidal content. And at the time, those statements were dismissed as being, said in the heat of the moment. People were outraged, rightly, by what happened on October 7th. But by May of 2024, it became clear that, in fact, what the IDF was doing was making Gaza uninhabitable for its population and moving the population increasingly to the south, concentrating it to the extent that it could in the south, and making it impossible for them to come back by destroying their homes. So that appeared to me to be a process of ethnic cleansing, which became genocidal because people had no place to go to.
Mm. Well, we will talk about all this. Let's talk about you first. And are you afraid that the Israeli ambassador is going to be mad that you're on this show? Because he regularly watches this show, and whenever he doesn't like something, he calls it out on X. I saw him protesting some kind of Spiegel interview with you.
Yes.
You guys know each other, Mr. Prozo?
I think I met him once.
Really?
I was trying to remember at some dinner.
He was a UN ambassador at some point, so maybe you met him.
No, I met him in Germany, I think, once.
Huh.
I think it was in Germany. I don't know. Yes, but I'm shaking in my boots.
You were born in Israel, 1954. Did your parents, they immigrated from Europe?
My mother.
Your mother?
My father was born in Palestine.
Really?
Yeah.
And how did they meet? When she got to...
They met in high school.
In Israel?
In Petach Tikva, in the Gate of Hope.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, well, Petach Tikva was the first secular settlement in Palestine. Really? It's now part of Tel Aviv, but at the time it was pretty far from Tel Aviv. Mm-hmm. It was established in 1882. Mm. It was a moshava, as they called it, which is like a colony. Mm-hmm. It's the Hebrew for a colony.
Have you ever talked to your dad about the time of the British Mandate of Palestine and how life was as a Jew there?
Look, I didn't just talk with my dad about it. My dad was a novelist, and so he wrote a lot about it. So one was never sure when he told you what happened, was it what happened or the way it happens in his novels, because they're autobiographical novels. Oh. So yes, I heard and read a fair amount about his childhood.
Was he part of like some kind of resistance? Because there were some Jewish groups fighting, I think the British and the Arabs and all this. Was he part of that? Or was he too young?
Well, look, I mean, he was born in 1926.
Oh, yeah.
So his first real encounter with violence was when he was 17, and he volunteered to the Jewish Brigade of the British Army because he wanted to go and kill Germans. That was his... He also wanted to leave his home because his home was very poor and religious, and he didn't want any of that. And he thought his home was diaspora, like galuti, as they called it. Mm-hmm. And he felt that he was a young Israeli male, and he knew that Jews were being slaughtered in Europe. And so he wanted to go and fight in that war.
Did he?
He did. Yeah.
Where did he fight?
In Italy.
But so you didn't fight the Germans?
Yeah.
There were Germans as well? Not only Italians?
Oh, yeah, you should know your German history, yes.
This is Jung Naiv, so...
Yes, Germany, when Mussolini was deposed and the Allies invaded Sicily and then Italy, Hitler sent a number of divisions to Italy and took over most of Italy. And then the Allies worked their way very slowly through Rome, and so there were very heavy battles, actually. It was a pretty bad war. There were also many partisans. There were quite a few slaughters of populations by German army units or villages where there was partisan activity. And so he was part of that fighting. But I would say that his most searing experience was not the fighting. It was just later, because then they became occupation troops in Austria and then in Belgium. And he encountered the DPs, the displaced persons, the survivors. And for him, and he wrote a fair amount about it, that was the most painful experience, the one that really determined much of what he wrote and what he thought later.
Why?
Look, as I said, I mean, he wanted to leave his home and become a soldier and be independent, partly because his home was still, although his father came from Poland and was a Zionist, his father and mother still spoke Yiddish with each other. They lived a very kind of traditional Jewish life in the new land. And he grew up into that. And the encounter with Jews who were in many ways like his parents, who had been mostly killed, but those who survived, who had been brutalized, who had been humiliated, who had no hope, who were displaced, who lost everything. And I think as a young man, you know, Jewish soldiers in the Jewish brigade wore a shoulder tag with a Star of David. And for Jewish survivors of the Holocaust to see soldiers wearing a Star of David that they had been told to wear to humiliate them, and that there were these soldiers who wore that, for them it was like a miracle. And so the sort of encounter between these two groups, those young soldiers coming from Palestine, encountering these people who had been humiliated, degraded, and for those people to see these young, strong men coming to liberate them with the Star of David, being of their own, was a very powerful and important moment. And if you want to understand anything about post-Holocaust Jewish existence, including Israeli existence, you have to remember that. And it's often these days forgotten.
When did he go back? Go back home?
Yeah.
Before Israel was established?
Yes. Oh. He came back on leave in 1946, and then he was released from service before returning to Europe. He managed to marry my mother. They went to the university for one semester. The Hebrew University was the only university in Israel then. And then the war of 1948 began. And they just left the classrooms and went to fight in that war.
Did you talk about how the time was, what the time was like when Israel was established? I mean, right after the war began, right? But the UN plan and all this.
Yeah.
Was he worried, or was he excited about the future?
Oh, they were thrilled. I mean, when
the dream of Zionism was fulfilled, or something.
Yes, when November 29th, 1947, when the UN proposed the partition of Palestine, which meant the creation of a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, which has not been created. There was dancing in the streets. Everyone was, yes, I mean, you can see photographs. But then, of course, immediately thereafter begins a kind of civil war between the Palestinian Arabs who oppose the partition, and their leadership opposed it, and Arab countries opposed it, and the Yishuv, as it was called, the pre-state Jewish community was called the Yishuv. And that continues until May 14th, when the state, May 14th, 1948, when the state is declared, and that's when the British leave. They leave the next morning on May 15th, and that's the beginning of the other war. That civil war becomes a war with Arab armies. And it was a very costly war.
Did he fight in the war?
Yeah. He was declared dead 3 times in that war.
What?
At least my mother was told 3 times that he had been killed. And so she mourned him 3 times, and each time he sort of showed up and said, no, I'm fine, actually. Yes, he was in that war, and she was a soldier in that war too.
Really?
Yeah.
What did she do?
And she was a very small woman, very brave.
What did she do?
She was in a stronghold. They had these, how would you call it? Like a stronghold. These were small units that would be put on top of hills with some sandbags. And what they called Czechim, which was Czechs, but it was Czech rifles, but they actually were German Mausers. Some of them, I still trained with one of those, and they had a little swastika on them. But they came to Israel through Czechoslovakia because Czechoslovakia ended up with a whole bunch of German weapons, and they were selling them to Israel for the war. And of course, the Soviet Union was instructing its own clients to provide arms to Israel. At the time, Israel was being supported by the Soviet Union. And so she was there with her Chechi, with that big Mauser that was about as big as she was. I have photographs of her, you know, it's quite moving in its way. Much of the time she was in Jerusalem, which was besieged. She lost a child as a result of that, her first child, because of malnutrition. You know, it's an interesting question because for my parents, this was a very important experience that they never forgot. They lost many of their friends. The casualties among those who volunteered to fight, which are always a minority, the casualties were very, very high. They lost many of their friends. But I could never get them to talk much about what happened in the war.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
So your dad talked about the World War II?
And wrote about it.
And wrote about it? But why would both of them not talk about the other war?
He wrote a whole novel. In English, it's called The Brigade, about his experience in the British Army.
Right.
Only in his last novel, when he was already in his 80s, he has a chapter about what Israelis call the War of Independence. And he describes a few obvious war crimes, but even then quite lightly. And so they took much of what happened in that war, which was filled with atrocities and with ethnic cleansing, of course. They took it to their grave. They never really talked about it.
Were they ashamed? Of the atrocities, not fighting the war itself.
One would assume. But I think it was a very mixed experience.
Did you try to talk to them about it?
I did.
They blocked? No. They didn't want to talk
you know, I mean, I don't want to make analogies, but there is a generation in Germany of people who...
I always ask those questions when it comes to guests whose parents were part of either the Wehrmacht or Nazi Germany. And their parents, most of the time, were very reluctant to talk about it or hashed out. Were like, don't talk to me about this. Were you curious why they wouldn't talk about it?
Well, I knew why. I was pretty sure why.
You knew because of school, of newspapers, of books?
Okay, that's so. These are things that take time, right? It's not when I was a kid.
No, of course.
I didn't ask any questions. I mean, our parents were heroes, and that's all we knew, right? My generation basically was raised on two big negations. One was a typical Zionist negation, which was the negation of the diaspora. And that's what I was alluding to before, that my father was also already raised in that thing. You don't look back at the 2,000 years of Jews living in exile. You connect directly to the pre-exile existence, Jewish statehood before that, under Roman times. But you don't look back. You look forward.
You skip 2,000 years.
The future belongs to you, if you know that term. Die Zukunft gehört uns. We were the future. My generation was the future. We were supposed to be, we are the first generation of people born into the state.
And we did what had to be done.
And not only that, we normalized Jewish existence. We were supposed to be strong, athletic, suntanned, brave, cool, and not have any of these attributes of Jewish diaspora identity. And what were these attributes? Well, Zionism took it from anti-Semitism. So the attributes that were given to Jews by anti-Semitism, Jews being weak, being cowardly, being effeminate, not wanting to ever, defend themselves. So Zionism was the answer to that, and we were the children of Zionism. We were born into that. So as I was growing up, that was the kind of indication that we were internalizing. This was the one negation, not to talk about the past. Now, my generation, I'd say by the time we got to our 40s, many members of my generation started asking questions because what kind of past do we have? We were born from nothing. It's a pretty miserable past to have. So we started asking our parents or our grandparents if they were still alive, and often we missed them. They died on us before, if we had grandparents, before we asked them these questions about where they came from, what sort of life they had. And we discovered a whole world that we did not know about.
Right.
For instance, I discovered that my grandmother was fluent in German and loved reading German literature, although she came from Buchach, a little town in what is now West Ukraine, and had never lived in Germany. So, but I never knew that until she was living in our home in her 80s. So this was one negation. But the other negation was the negation of the Nakba. We, of course, we didn't know the word then, but the negation of the expulsion of the Palestinians, nobody spoke about it.
Why?
So, well, why is actually not very hard to explain. Why? Because, look...
expulsion is wrong.
Expulsion is wrong. And in 1948, the state in being, the state that was being created, had a problem. And the problem was that the goal of Zionism was to create a Jewish majority state. How do you create a Jewish majority state in an entity, so-called historical Palestine, mandatory Palestine, the Palestine between the river and the sea, in which the Jews, even after all the efforts made and the help from the British between World War I and the aftermath of World War II, the Jewish community was still only a third of the population. 2/3 were Arabs. Now, the obvious solution to this problem would have been for millions of Jews to come from Eastern Europe. But they were dead. They were killed. And so how else do you resolve that problem? And the solution was to kick the Arabs out. And that's what happened in 1948. Israel became, by the end of the war, a Jewish majority state. What was the state of Israel then, which was bigger than the partition, of course. It was bigger than what had been handed over to it by the UN. That's how it became a Jewish majority state, and only 20% of the population, at the time it was 150,000 Palestinians, remained in it. So that process of expulsion, often brutal, and then of covering it up, of destroying the houses over a period of 20 years, destroying villages, between 400 and 500 villages, building, let's say, the University of Tel Aviv, in which I studied and later taught, is built over a Palestinian village. Sheikh Mouanis was a big Palestinian village north of Tel Aviv. It's gone. But when I was a kid, I played in those houses that still existed of that village.
So,
but we didn't ask any questions. We knew there were Arabs there once, sometime. Nobody told us what happened there, and we didn't ask. There was no language to speak about it.
They didn't teach you at school? They didn't talk about it at home?
No, I mean, the only thing that was said was that...
did you have, like, Arab friends who were like, Omar?
No, there were no Arab friends.
You were segregated?
Completely. We never met Arabs. We'd see sometimes Bedouin coming up from the Negev, from the desert, with herds of sheep at the time. Sometimes the family, mine as many others, if there was something to celebrate, we'd go to Jaffa and have an Oriental meal. So we'd have hummus and tahini and shish kebab, which was not what we ate at home. We ate East European food, of course, chicken soup, knedlach. But so to celebrate, we'd go to an Arabic restaurant. But there were no Arabic kids in my class, and most of the Arabs lived segregated. mostly in the Galilee, and then in Jaffa and Akko. East Jerusalem was under Jordanian rule until 1967.
Do you remember the first time you met like an Israeli Arab or a Palestinian when you were young? I mean, there was still an Arab minority living in Israel.
Yes, but so you would meet people such as in a restaurant, or if you went to Jaffa to buy pitas on Passover because you couldn't buy bread in Tel Aviv; it was not allowed. So, but you wanted to have bread, you'd go to Jaffa and buy pita bread. But the first time I actually had a conversation, a real conversation as a grown-up, was in my 20s.
Wow.
And it was not in the country. It was in Europe.
In Europe?
Yeah.
What, you remember the conversation? Like, did this person share their view on the Nakba in 1948 and all this?
You know, I don't really remember all the details, or most of the details of that conversation, but it was a political conversation. And then at the university, when I went to Oxford, there were Arabs there. But it was only much later that I actually made Palestinian friends, much later on. So part of the success, if you want to call it that, of Zionism was it's not exactly, I'll take that back. It's not Zionism. It's the state of Israel was a segregation between the communities. Now, there are exceptions. I didn't belong to that exception, but I have friends. You know, in 2022, I interviewed a large number of people, both Jewish Israeli and Palestinian citizens, mostly people of my generation, and I spoke with them about their childhoods. It's a project that I'm going to publish in a couple of years. And one interesting thing is those Jewish kids who grew up in communist families, and it's Israeli communism, it's a very peculiar type of communism.
The kibbutzim and all this?
Not kibbutzim. I was also born in a kibbutz. But it was not the kibbutzim. The kibbutzim could be socialist and nationalist at the same time, and segregated.
Right.
It was people belonged to the Communist Party. And the Communist Party in the 1950s and 60s insisted on, especially in the youth movement, of Jewish and Palestinian kids being together. Going to camps together, traveling together, learning to an extent each other's languages. Obviously, most Arabs in Israel speak Hebrew, and most Israelis don't speak Arabic because they're the majority. But those people had a more intimate experience and had more Palestinian friends, but they were a minority. And they were themselves, in a sense, part of a segregated group because communists themselves were not part of the mainstream of Israeli society. And even within communism, there was a split later on between those who remain Zionists, Zionist communists, and those who really opted for the Palestinian side. And the Communist Party became two parties, one really dominated by Jews and the other by Arabs.
Did you get to learn about Palestinians at school?
No.
Or was the word Palestinians present, or did you talk about Arabs?
So when you talk about denials, there's another denial, and that's on the Palestinian side. There were also two denials on the Palestinian side. One denial was the denial of the Nakba. You couldn't talk about the Nakba. People were afraid to talk about it. You have to understand that Palestinians who remained in Israel were very fearful. And immediately after the state is created...
Like fearful that they're next in being expelled?
Of course.
Okay.
And immediately after the state is created, although they get citizenship and supposedly have equal rights, there is military rule imposed on all the Palestinians living in Israel as Israeli citizens for 20 years, between 1949 and 1966. It's dissolved in December 1966. And then in June 67, Israel expands and gets a whole bunch of other Palestinians. Many of them are those who were expelled in 1948. So those Palestinian communities in Israel can't really talk about the Nakba. They're afraid. And they are, as secret services work, they don't know if one of their classmates or co-workers might speak to Israeli intelligence about them. They were recruiting people from within the community. So people were afraid to talk about it. But the other big negation for Palestinians is their identity. In Israel, when I was growing up, you didn't even speak about an Arab minority. You spoke about minorities, because the whole goal of the state was to split that minority into different groups. So the term was the minorities, not the Arab minority, or the minorities. And those could be Christian Palestinians, they could be Arab Sunni Palestinians, they could be Bedouin, but they were minorities. And again, for that group, they didn't really know who they were. Most of the elites had fled in 1948, those who could afford to, went to Beirut or to Cairo or to Europe. Much of the urban population was gone. The people remained were in villages. And in villages, they had very local identities. And so what we see now is not what there was at the time, that they developed among Palestinian citizens of Israel a strong sense of national identity and a strong sense of rights that they ought to have as citizens of the state. That took a long time, and it certainly did not exist in my childhood.
So, as I said, you were born in 1954 in a kibbutz?
Mm-hmm.
How was life like that?
Well, look, I was born in a kibbutz. It was a very left-wing kibbutz. It was a Shomer HaTzair kibbutz.
Are there ever any right-wing kibbutz? No.
Well, they're religious kibbutzim.
Okay.
They're different. And they were more mainstream sort of Labour Party kibbutzim. But the Shomer HaTzair was the most left of the Zionist left. It was the party that represented them was Mapam, which was a party that before 1948 spoke about a binational state. In fact, my parents supported the binational state.
Binational state?
Yes. This was...
Like what Omer Bartov is pitching these days?
This is an old idea. He can tell you about it more than I can. Sure. But yes, the idea within the left, within the real left,
right,
was that there should be...
a one-state solution, we would say today.
And part of it was an idea of justice. Part of it, and people will tell you that if you sort of scratch the surface a bit, they didn't want to give anything up. They didn't want partition. If you have partition, what happens to Nablus? What happens to Jericho? What happens to Bethlehem? Those are historical sites. They appear in the Bible. They're part of the Jewish heritage. So if you have a binational state, okay, you have the whole thing. But you have the two peoples, the two groups. All this line of that left vanished after 48. The war was so brutal, the losses were so grave, the expulsion was so horrendous that the whole discourse on binationalism disappeared. And is not around until 67. And then in 67, a completely new paradigm is created, right? That now we have Greater Israel, but the people living in those territories are people who will never get equal rights. They'll never be citizens. So that's a kind of creeping apartheid reality that begins to emerge after 1967. It was not thinkable between 48 and 67.
Like the West still dreams, or the UN and all this, they still dream of a two-state solution, as they call it.
Yes.
Omri is pitching the binational state.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with them about it. I think, a binational state would be a wonderful thing. It's the most fair thing. Gideon Levy, the Israeli journalist, was exactly my age and great guy, and writes beautifully, also is pitching that idea. I think it's a great idea, but I don't think it has any bias. And ideas without bias and don't really... So I think in the future, several decades from now...
Several decades?
Yes, maybe. But in between, there needs to be something else. And if you talk about the future, the future will be either a full-blown apartheid state, meaning that apartheid will be part of the entire system of the state, not only apartheid in the West Bank and in Gaza, although in Gaza it'd be worse than apartheid. People be concentrated in a small part of the territory.
But apartheid in proper Israel as well?
But apartheid also against Arab citizens of Israel, Palestinian citizens, and an authoritarian rule and violence against any opponents of the regime, Jewish opponents of the regime as well. This is in the works right now, and an erosion of the legal system, of legal protections for civil rights, even for Jewish citizens. But if that happens, and it will happen unless it's stopped, and it won't be stopped from within, it has to be stopped from without.
Really?
Yeah. There's no one to stop it from within. No one. There has to be, the break has to come from the outside. It has to be brutal and relentless and unforgiving.
But who's supposed to do that?
To impose a change in the political paradigm. It has to be imposed. It won't be generated from within. There are no forces in Israel to generate it. Yes, there's, okay.
I mean, before October 7th, I was in August 2023, I was in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and I saw the protests, the pro-democracy protest, the protest, let's call them that, against the justice reforms and all this. Yeah. This seemed like a big movement for democracy, for defending democratic values. So there are people, and a lot, maybe not a majority, but a lot of people in Israel who want to keep a democracy, a democratic state, and not get into an authoritarian rule.
And did you notice what they were not protesting?
Well, not against the occupation. And
no, they
not
refused.
Not for equality and all this.
They refused. I mean, I was part of it in August of 2023. Some friends of mine and myself published a kind of petition, which we called the Elephant in the Room, which was at the time signed by about 2,500 scholars, academics, people writing on Jewish history, on the Middle East, on Israeli history, historians, philosophers, intellectuals. And the argument was that you cannot have democracy in Israel as long as you have occupation. Israel is a 50-50 country. 50% of the people being ruled by Israel are Palestinians. 2 million Israeli citizens with increasingly limited rights. In 2018, the state passed a basic law. Israel is a nation state. That's a declaration that Palestinians don't really belong to it. Those who are citizens, 3 million live in the West Bank. They have no rights at all. And most Israelis don't think they deserve rights. They should just be quiet. And 2 million live or lived in what was Gaza. So there's 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Jews between the river and the sea. You can't have a democracy like that. That's not a democracy. So democracy was being eroded and the country was being corrupted progressively because of the occupation. And without the idea that we can't talk about let's not talk about the occupation now, let's first talk about our rights, means that you're perpetuating the actual problem. So without solving that, no democracy.
I remember at the protests, you almost didn't see any Palestinian flags. And I talked to people, they were like, yeah, we don't want that.
No, and people were wrapping themselves up in Israeli flags.
Reclaim it from the right, they said.
Yeah, to show that but reclaiming it from the right, why? To show that they're also patriots. And you have to remember, one of the things that was most troubling for the government was that reserve pilots were saying that they won't go into training if the government continues this judicial coup, so-called overhaul. Mm-hmm. And, if they don't go into training, then within weeks they can't fly anymore. And that appeared to be a major issue. Then came October 7th. Mm-hmm. What did these pilots do? They got into their cockpits and they destroyed Gaza. More civilians have been killed in Gaza by these pilots. In Israel, the saying was, "Hatovim latais," the best go into the Air Force.
Really?
Those, our best boys, those best boys, and some women too, went to the Air Force, went back into their planes, and destroyed Gaza with huge bombs. So that's where the split is. The idea that you can have a nice, I love Tel Aviv, or loved it. And I would go there a lot. I mean, I went to Israel usually 3 times a year, and my son lives there, and my best friends are there. But the idea that you can live in this bubble of cosmopolitanism and tolerance, and you don't see what's happening 20 miles down the road in the West Bank, where the same people are sitting with you in a bar having a drink the day before, the day after, get into uniform and break into people's homes at 4 a.m. to impose the occupation, to show who's boss. If you think that that's possible, it's not. And so much of what you saw after October 7th had been built up for decades, over time, from 1967 and increasingly after the failure of Oslo, after the assassination of Rabin in 1995, the Second Intifada, and from the year 2000, the process of growing repression of Palestinians, growing brutalization, growing dehumanization by both sides, in the sense that when you rule over people, you dehumanize them because you can't think of them as being like you. Otherwise, you wouldn't behave like that. And you yourself become dehumanized by doing that. That's a process that, anybody writing about colonialism, like Emes Ezer, wrote about all this already in the 1950s, of course. That's what happened in Israeli society. And so in that sense, what has happened after October 7th is not a surprise. It's shocking. It's horrifying, but it's not surprising.
And since you call what's happening in Gaza a genocide, it's not surprising that Israel is committing a genocide based on the last couple of decades.
You know what is most surprising? And surprised me too?
No.
Is not that all the demons that existed in Israeli society burst out after October 7th, when hundreds of Israeli civilians were murdered, and when the army was humiliated, and when the country felt insecure, and the way to respond to it was to lash out as brutally as possible and to say, we have to eradicate that issue entirely, and nobody's innocent, everybody's involved. That didn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. What surprised me, because we always said that at some point, people like me, said at some point, there is a dynamic in Israel of ethnic cleansing, that at some point the Nakba would be completed. It was an incomplete event.
Oh. It's not a second Nakba.
And there were forces that would have wanted to do it. But had they been given the trigger, and October 7th was a major trigger. Mm-hmm. But what surprised me, and what I always did not believe would happen, was that Israel would be given license to continue doing it with impunity for 2 years. That was shocking.
By the West?
Of course, by its allies. by the same countries that claim to be the protectors of international law, of civil rights. This is the first genocide that is carried out by a democratic country, or a country claiming to be a democracy, and seen as such, the villa in the jungle, it called itself. That's what Barak, the prime minister, Ehud Barak, said about it. It tells you something about...
A villa in the jungle.
The villa in the jungle. So it tells you a little bit about... and this was a Labour prime minister, right? Huh. Who are the jungle, right? So... but that's the country that was seen. Yeah.
Barbarians.
Yeah, the barbarians at the gate, of course. The Arabs, the Palestinians. And we are the villa. That's a very strange image. But the more sort of regular image was Israel was a beacon of democracy, of human rights. It's the sort of oasis in the Middle East, the only democratic country, right, in the Middle East. That country is the first one which is allied with Germany, with France, with Britain, with all those countries that claim to be the strongholds of democracy and civil rights, and of course with the United States, the beacon of democracy. And they're not only allowing it to do it, they're not sitting quietly, they're providing it with arms, they're providing it with diplomatic cover, they're supplying it with an economic hinterland. The EU is Israel's main trading partner, and nothing has happened. A few statements here and there, but for 2 years, Israel could get away with it. And even the most extreme right-wing people in Israel always believed that if they began ethnic cleansing, they had, a short time to do it. You had to be really quick, because then, the democracy would say, no, we can't do it.
Why were they wrong? Why were you wrong, obviously?
That's something that I keep thinking about.
Were you naive about Western politics or Western geopolitics?
Yes. Yeah.
Why do they support it? I mean, let's break it down to calling it they support what's happening.
Yes.
Why do we, as the Europeans and Americans, why do we support it?
Well, partly because of what your new chancellor said, Chancellor Merz. The Israelis are doing the dirty work for us.
The dirty work of killing Arabs?
Yeah, what did he mean when he said that? Did you think about it?
He talked about Israel's attacks on Iran, but...
Yeah, but, I mean, where's that coming from? First of all, it's an anti-Semitic statement, of course. He wasn't aware of it, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the usual statement is the Jews are doing the dirty work for us. But here it got the twist, and it became the Israelis. But behind that is... So that's part of it. Behind it is what you see in all European countries today, that they don't know how to deal with the new populations that have come into their countries. And many people in these countries, not all of them far right, not all of them AfD, don't feel comfortable with having Arabs, having Muslims, having people from Southeast Asia. And in that sense, there is a kind of sense of, how would I call it, of affinity with Israel. Israel has also been attacked by these hordes, by these foreign, strange people who pray 5 times a day and cover their faces, and they're not like us. And if you want to maintain Israel as a democracy like us, well, you can understand why they behave that way. So there is a kind of empathy.
I remember talking to the by then AfD leader, Frauke Petri, and she loved Israel. And when I asked why, she was like, well, she basically said, well, they do with the Arabs what we wish we could do with them.
Voilà. That's exactly my point. And you can be, and Netanyahu got that because he's a savvy politician. You can be anti-Semitic, but you can love Israel too. No problem, because you don't want Jews, in your neighborhood, but you love Israel because Israel shows how you deal with all those others. So that's one reason, but there are other reasons. I mean, Europeans in particular, I would say, and Germans especially, find it excruciating to criticize Israel. It's very, very difficult. And there's a history. It's understandable why the Staatsräson that Angela Merkel came up with has been, I'd say, convoluted, distorted into the notion that you have to support the state of Israel whatever it does. Doesn't matter. We are always on their side, rather than be what it should be. Yes, of course we support Israel. We have a duty, a responsibility, historic responsibility to support the state, but not to support this. Our responsibility is, first of all, to the regime of international law and human rights that was created in response to the Holocaust. One has to remember, in 1948, two things happened. One is the establishment of the State of Israel, and the second is the Genocide Convention, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, and both of them are responses to the crimes of the Nazis. And you can't support a state that carries out genocide because it says, well, we also had a genocide, and so now we have license to do it too. No, you don't. And if Germany doesn't step in, it is complicit. And for the distortion of this notion that Germany becomes complicit in genocide because it's protecting Israel, and it's protecting Israel because of the genocide the Germans did to Jews, now it's protecting it in murdering Palestinians, is mind-boggling.
I mean, the German ruling class and the media pundits, they rightly say there's specific German reasons for supporting Israel, or the pretension of Israel as a very good friend or the best friend of Germany, and we need to support and help it out. But when you call it a friendship, I mean, if we were best friends and I saw you doing criminal things, I would go to you and be like, Omar, you got to stop that. You're going to be in big trouble if you keep doing this, and I can't keep supporting what you do.
You might even call the police
to protect you as well.
Correct. So if Germany really cares,
and I can give you a gun to
correct,
to help you.
So see, I mean, if Germany really cares about Israel,
which they say they do,
it has to save it from the powers that took over, from these fascist, Jewish supremacist, genocidal, messianic, far-right powers that are now ruling Israel.
But they know that these powers are, these fascists and all that.
But they are those who can help Israel be rid of them rather than support them. They can help Israel into a new future. That's what I said before. Israel does not have, right now, it's unfortunate because it has wonderful people, very creative, very special people, and yet it does not have the internal power, the internal dynamic to liberate itself from these forces of evil that have taken over. And Germans should know something about that too. Germany can actually help Israel, especially because of its own experience, not only responsibility for Israel, but its own historical experience. How do you come out of genocide, of destruction, of bloody-mindedness, of a sense of supremacy, of a sense of license, of a sense that your crimes are glorious pages in history? How do you liberate yourself from that? Germany was liberated from that because it was destroyed. I don't want Israel to be destroyed. But if it's not to be destroyed, then it has to be helped out of it. And the only way to help it out of it is through shock therapy. And that shock therapy has to come from the outside.
Can you explain what that could look like?
It could look like
how can European powers, Germany, help Israel get rid of their fascist problem?
Look, it's so that's one of the things that frustrates me, that people ask, what do we do? How do we stop it? So I would say we have two major wars, major crises going on now. One is the brutal, illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the other is what Israel is doing in Gaza and in the West Bank. The Russian case is difficult to stop because the Russians are producing their own arms. They have vast resources. They have good relations with all kinds of strange countries like North Korea and so forth. The Israelis cannot continue doing what they're doing for more than a week without constant support from the outside. They can't do it. President Biden could have stopped the war when it was still a war, which it has not been since summer of 2024. There is no war in Gaza. There's a lot going on there, but it's not a war. He could have stopped it in November or December 2023. That's when I wrote that first op-ed in the New York Times, and I hoped that somebody would pay attention. And then it might have been a case, because by then 10,000 people had already died in Gaza, most of them civilians, in the first 4 weeks. But you might have said, okay, there were war crimes, crimes against humanity. It might have become genocide, but it didn't. But he did nothing. He didn't stop it. How do you stop it? You say, if you continue, you're on your own. You're not getting arms. You're not getting economic help, and you're not getting diplomatic cover. And then what happens? Israel does not get 2,000-pound bombs. It doesn't get tank engines made in Germany. It doesn't get submarines, and it doesn't get airplanes. It's all made elsewhere. And this goes to the Security Council, right? The International Court of Justice passed provisional measures, demanded provisional measures in early 2024. And Israel said, why should we care? The ICJ is an arm of the UN. It was created with the UN. Its enforcement arm is the Security Council. The Security Council, if it wants to enforce a ruling by the ICJ, can do it easily. It says, okay, you're not obeying, fine. Economic sanctions and military embargo. Of course, the United States has veto power. But if the United States wanted to do that, everything would have stopped, screeched to a halt. What you saw now with President Trump, who is hardly my favorite politician, and who is wreaking havoc in the United States, but what you saw him doing with Netanyahu was clearly, if you don't stop, you're on your own. And Netanyahu stopped. Now, he's very savvy and he's trying to spin it one way or the other. But that has to come from the outside. And if it's consistent, and if there's a political plan behind it, which appears to be part of these 20 points, very vague, maybe unenforceable, but in the right direction of a new political horizon, then you, by perforce, will be rid of those people, of the Smotriches and the Ben-Gvirs and the Netanyahus of this world. But it has to come from the outside.
Because the population will be like, all right, you guys got to go.
Yeah,
for us to be safe.
Yes, of course, because we can't live like that. Because we have inflation, unemployment. We're getting no research grants from Europe. Most of the research grants are from Europe. There's inflation. People ultimately vote through the pocketbook.
That kind of sounds like a Western BDS movement, what you describe. Like the West seems to need to boycott Israel, divest from Israel, and sanction Israel.
You know, I mean, until October 7th, I used to say that in terms of BDS, there are things that I support and things that I don't. I thought that military control over Israel, control of arms to Israel, and we can talk more about it because there are other reasons for support for Israel and for the supply of arms to Israel, which is not ideological but is purely economic, national interests, and so forth. But control of arms and use of economic measures, I was totally in favor of. What I was against until October 7th was the kind of boycott against intellectuals, against academics, against universities, because I thought, and I think generally it was the case, that these were the only places where there was a different kind of discourse, and you could hope to develop that. And if you shut that down, these contacts, then nothing is left.
We're 2 years in.
I have been deeply disappointed by Israeli academe, by Israeli universities. I actually don't want to go and speak at any of them. I have severed connections with a number of them officially.
Do they hold their nose, or do they self-censor, or do they support?
They do everything. They deny, they support, they persecute their own faculty, and especially students and Arab students. They've behaved abysmally, especially against Palestinians, of course, and they have not spoken out. A few months ago, finally, there was a statement by over 1,000 professors from all academic institutions in Israel, calling upon their own administrations to say something about the war crimes. They didn't use the G word, they said war crimes. And that was something like 5% or less, or 3% of the entire faculty in Israel, faculty members in Israel. And the administration, of course, the university administrations totally ignored it. And that statement said, we have been silent too long. We knew what was going on, and we've been silent. So you have a very complex process in Israel, and the universities and the intelligentsia are very much part of it. It's a process of denial. And it's a denial that is not only denial of what happened in the past, like we know denial of the Holocaust. It didn't happen. It's denial of the present. It's a denial that facilitates a continuation of what is going on by saying, first of all, it's not happening. And secondly, well, if it happened, they deserve it. That's the kind of denial logic that facilitates more and more violence and shows the intelligentsia, as often in the past, academics, writers, poets, singers, artists, most of them towing the line. Self-imposed Gleichschaltung. That's to me was extremely painful to see.
But I thought the Israeli society is like a free society. How can this denialism become so strong?
You should watch Israeli TV programs. They're in Hebrew, of course. Israelis live in a completely different universe. You would not know what's happening in Gaza if you watch the nightly TV news in Israel, which is what most Israelis do. You wouldn't know. You see Gaza only through the gun sights of our brave, now heroic, they're all heroes now.
Really?
Yeah, now they're all heroes. Every soldier is a hero through their gun sights. And if ever some kind of inkling comes in that maybe there were some civilians who died who should not have died, it's presented either as this is bad for our self-image, or this is some kind of propaganda against us. So what you find with the case of, as you remember, when there was a bit of more discomfort in the Western media about starvation, right? Because there were these photographs and nobody could deny those photographs. Well, then Israeli Hasbara started working, say, well, these kids had pre-existing conditions and so forth. And in these
AI images.
Or these pictures were taken elsewhere at another time, another place. And the main line in the Israeli media was that this was a problem, this was a success, the famine campaign by Hamas. This was a Hamas-generated famine campaign. Not famine, but simply a propaganda campaign, a successful one, that we somehow screwed up. Not in starving people, but in allowing Hamas to show images that are obviously, AI-generated or forced. So how do you break this bubble? You can do it if there are enough voices, but those voices, which exist in Israel, are heard only in Haaretz, which is mostly read by foreigners.
Really?
It's got a very narrow distribution in Israel. And in an even more marginal but very important news outlet, Plus 972 in English, Local Call in Hebrew. And they have wonderful journalists there. They do amazing investigations, better than most of the foreign media, but it goes only out.
What about the Israeli NGOs like B'Tselem,
Yes.
Breaking the Silence? Are they
Yes.
heard, or are they only being heard in the West?
Only in the West.
Fuck.
Yeah. The same, you take Physicians for Human Rights, the Israeli branch. They came out with a very powerful report, the same or a couple of days after B'Tselem, on genocide in Gaza, and they focused on the deliberate, not accidental, but deliberate destruction of the entire medical infrastructure in Gaza, with enormous amounts of evidence. So that was very, very important. But if you look at the Association of Israeli Doctors, of pediatrics, of psychologists, nothing, not a peep. So it's a very small group that is doing something very important and very brave, but they're either ignored or seen as traitors or seen as anti-Semitic or self-hating or whatever they might be. But definitely what is true is that they don't represent majority opinion in Israel.
What were the reactions from Israel when you came out and said this is genocide? Did people care? Was it reported on?
Not directly, no. The first op-ed that I published in the New York Times, which warned that there might be genocide, in November 10th, 2023.
A month after October 7th.
Yeah. Was not published in Hebrew, but Haaretz, English version, published an op-ed against it by a bunch of Holocaust historians, Israeli and American, saying that what I was saying was outrageous, that there's no genocide and no worry of genocide, that the IDF is completely acting within the rules. And I was appalled at the time. And if you take it all the way to the op-ed that you're referring to of July 15th, 2025, one of the things that I wrote there was in continuation to what I said in November 23. That is, but that's 2 years later, almost 2 years later, that those people that you would have expected to have spoken out against genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity and brutalities, those people who, as historians or directors of institutions that were built to commemorate the Holocaust and to say never again, that those very same people are saying nothing, are being silent. And by doing that, they first of all discredited themselves. It's a shame. But also they are destroying the entire notion that was created not immediately after the Holocaust, but decades thereafter, that the Holocaust has some kind of universal meaning, that what you need to understand from it is don't do these things again, create all kinds of mechanisms and create a public conscience and a collective memory that will not allow that to happen again. And the people who are the leaders of these institutions created under the name of speaking out against that, say nothing.
I mean, you were part of the editorial board of the Yad Vashem journal?
Yeah.
And you resigned because of this?
I resigned. Look, I mean, I was on the editorial board
Right.
of Yad Vashem Studies for 2 decades or so. And this was already in the summer of 2024. We had a board meeting on Zoom because unlike people who work in Yad Vashem, who are state employees, and I can't blame them for wanting to keep their jobs, we are volunteers. And all of us were historians with some reputation, German, British, American, Israeli, and we do it because we think, there needs to be a board for this journal. It's an important journal, and we want to help. And I said at that meeting, look, I've become increasingly uncomfortable that a journal which is published by Yad Vashem, the state institution built to commemorate and research the Holocaust, that we say nothing about what's going on in Gaza. And when I said that, most people said nothing. It was just total silence.
Okay.
And then I wrote an email to everyone explaining what I had in mind and saying, I think that at this point, I've already been a member of this board for 20 years. I think it behooves me to resign. And again, most people said nothing. One member of the board was very angry at me, and he was not Israeli. And another sort of made some more, how would I put it, nuanced criticism, and that was it. And in some ways, it broke my heart. It's so sad. So some people try to compartmentalize. They say, well, I'm a scholar of the Holocaust. I don't know anything about what's going on in Gaza. I don't do a history of Zionism. I don't know Palestinians. I'm just this. So there are these sort of Fachidioten, right? I mean, they do the one thing and they don't want to say anything about anything else.
But if you're a scholar of the Holocaust, you're also a scholar of genocide.
You're supposed to be. Well,
or is there a difference between being a Holocaust scholar and being a genocide scholar?
There are people who make that difference. There shouldn't be a difference, but you will notice that I introduced myself by saying I'm a professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Mm-hmm. That kind of doesn't make sense, does it? Why Holocaust and Genocide Studies?
Unless you view the Holocaust as a super genocide,
right,
or an industrial genocide.
Or unique.
Or unique.
Or unique. So all the other genocides are terrible, and they have similarities, and we can study them comparatively and learn from them. And then there's the Holocaust. Okay. And the Holocaust is on its own terms. Now, I've never accepted that distinction, and most scholars today don't accept it, including most scholars of the Holocaust. But there is a divide between those who study the Holocaust and those who study genocide. And that divide it's partly disciplinary, academic, but partly more ideological. There have been arguments by scholars of genocide who don't study the Holocaust that because of the centrality of the Holocaust, the vast shadow that it casts over everything else, we can't really speak about other genocides. They don't get enough airtime because you keep comparing and saying, well, okay, there was a genocide in Cambodia, but it wasn't like the Holocaust. There was no Auschwitz. Rwanda was terrible. Yes, it was a genocide. But still, so there is this temptation to use the Holocaust as a measuring rod and to say, well, it doesn't quite measure up to the Holocaust, which is what you hear nowadays when people like me say what's happening in Gaza. I said that to the former Minister of Defense and Chief of Staff, who under Netanyahu, Moshe Bogi Ya'alon, who said himself that in northern Gaza there was ethnic cleansing. And I said to him, historically, ethnic cleansing is the first stage of genocide. And he said to me, well, but there's no shooting pits in northern Gaza. What he was trying to say is, if there is no Babi Yar and there is no Auschwitz, it can't be a genocide. But of course, that's not how you measure what genocide is. You have to go to the Genocide Convention, created after the Holocaust, but defining clearly what genocide is.
Well, in the convention, it doesn't say anything that there have to be like gas chambers.
It does not say there has to be
industrial killing of human beings.
No. And it certainly doesn't say it should look like the Holocaust. No. So there are certain kind of loyalties, I would say, that are threatened when you use the term genocide, especially if you apply that to Israel itself. Mm-hmm. And in Israel, to say that it's genocide is almost unthinkable. There are some people who say it, but they are on the rim of everything. Because in the Israeli mind, if you say Gaza is a genocide, you're saying Israel is carrying out genocide, Holocaust. And in that...
Is it like a mental blockade that, yes, we were victims of the probably worst genocide in history, the Holocaust, and that's why we cannot be a perpetrator of a genocide?
And of course, it is that, and the implication is exactly the opposite. So you say, we were the greatest victims of the greatest genocide of the modern era, and therefore, how can anybody say that we are carrying out genocide? But the opposite side of that is that we were victims of the greatest genocide in history, and therefore nobody, certainly not all these Europeans, has a right to tell us how we should behave when we feel that we are threatened, that we are under existential threat. We have license to do whatever it takes to stop this kind of threat toward us. And any threat, say the threat by people that we occupy, who want to be liberated from this occupation, that sort of threat, if we see it as existential...
People who have the right to resist.
Yes, well,
occupation.
You say that. I may say that. But people who live in that mentality don't see it that way. They see the people that they oppress, who are trying to liberate themselves, as presenting an existential threat to them. And therefore, the Holocaust gives them license for genocide. That's where we got to at this point, and it's a process. It didn't start on October 7th. It would be completely wrong to think it begins there. It's a process, but it got to this point.
You talked about the Israeli society today, that almost no one is speaking out, or people are silencing themselves, or media self-censoring. I mean, you're genocide scholar. You study other genocides in history. Are there similarities to other societies who committed genocides in what you see now in Israel?
Yeah, of course. Of course. This is very, very common. Denial is very common. It's almost necessary. And denial is not necessarily saying we are not doing it, but it's saying what you say we're doing is not what we're actually doing, right? So most countries and organizations engaged in genocide don't say they're doing genocide. They say it's a war of existence. It's a war of defense.
Self-defense.
Self-defense. It's internal enemies. We have no choice. They say it's a war. And in war, bad things happen. It's true, but it's a war. They say it's collateral damage. We don't want to kill civilians, but they happen to be there where they shouldn't be. So most of the time, most countries and organizations involved in genocide obviously don't call it genocide. There's another mechanism which is very interesting, that most states, societies, And genocide is a social event. It's not just a state event.
Social event.
I'll speak about that in a minute. But states, societies, organizations, individuals involved in genocide see themselves as the victims. They don't see themselves as perpetrators, they see themselves as victims. They're killing the people they're killing because those people had in the past victimized them, and they're killing them now even more because of the fear that if they don't, then they will kill them in return, that they will do to them what they are now doing to them. So that's why, for instance, you need to kill children, because children will grow up and be the next generation of those who will take revenge on you for what you did to them. So the sense of victimhood is extremely powerful in motivating violence. And that's not only in genocide, that's also in wars and other types of war crimes. You think about the Nazis. The Nazis, when they were killing Jews, they saw themselves as victims of the Jews. They were victimized by the Jews and the communists. The stab in the back, 1918, was a betrayal of Germany. Germany was stabbed in the back and destroyed in a war that it was about to win by these Jews and socialists. And so in the next war, and Hitler said that quite clearly in January 1939, if the Jews incite another world war, the result of it will be not the Bolshevization of Europe, but the extermination of the Jewish race. So he links Bolshevism and Jews. He speaks about the past, and he says what that means for the future. And once you're engaged in that, then, and a lot of people were saying that during World War II, what we have done is such that if we ever lose, terrible things will happen to us. They will do terrible things to us. The Jews, the Bolsheviks, the Russians, as they were called. So there's a dynamic of violence that is based in a self of victimhood.
I mean, even when I first arrived in Israel and talked to Palestinians and Israelis, and you talk to Israelis who are somehow against occupation and they want to make peace, but then there was always like, but, and as you said, like there needs to be a Jewish majority. We need to be in control. And I was like, why is that important when you want to be a democracy and equal rights and all that? Well, the Palestinians, they will kill us, they will rule over us. And what they didn't explicitly say it, but they were worried that the Palestinians will do to them, dominate them, occupy or oppress Jews in this new state or whatever it is, and that the Palestinians will do unto them what they have done with Palestinians.
Yeah, and that's, of course, within the context of Israeli history, that's the paradox of how do you create a Jewish and democratic state? What does it mean, Jewish and democratic? How do you square that circle? If it's Jewish...
I mean, Omri Böhm says that there can't be a democracy if you have a Jewish state. Because, like...
Yeah, I mean, there could be if there were only Jews there.
Exactly.
If there are only Jews, it's no problem. But as I said, the Nakba was incomplete. And 150,000 Palestinians stayed in the state, and now there are 2 million. So part of the dynamic of ethnic cleansing is to create not a Jewish majority state, but a Jewish state, period. Another dynamic is to change the state from being a Jewish state in the sense that it's majority ethnic Jewish to a Jewish state in the sense that it's Jewish, religiously Jewish. And there are strong forces in Israel now, and a general trend in Israeli society known as Hadata, of becoming more religious. All society in Israel now, all Jewish society is more religious, and the national religious, the fanatics, the messianics, have growing impact side by side with the Orthodox communities from which they actually came, but they are a very different branch of it. which are multiplying in very large numbers. They have many, many kids. And so the direction of Israeli society is also to become more and more Jewish, with this kind of ethno-national notion that we have to be all Jews here. And the Arabs, the Palestinians who are amongst us, who basically, of course, remind us, or ought to remind us, that once they were the majority, once that country belonged to them, and we don't want these reminders, if we can get rid of them, then we can be a thriving democracy. That's the paradox, that the kind of democracy that you're speaking about is one that is based on ethnic cleansing and genocide.
I want to get back to one more thing when it comes to denialism and talk about the German society, and especially like the political ruling class. Like a few months ago, before the last election, Olaf Scholz, the previous chancellor, was sitting on your chair, and at the end of the interview, I was talking about the war in Gaza, and also that the ICJ is ruling on what Israel is doing there, and it could end up, the ruling could be, this is genocide. And I asked him, if this turns out to be true, then Germany, as a supporter, military supporter, economic supporter, diplomatic supporter of Israel, will become, like after World War II, will become the first German support of a genocide, like after 80 years. And he didn't even want to talk about it. Like he was just like uttering like, kann ich mir nicht vorstellen, will ich nicht drüber reden, will ich nicht drüber reden. He denied thinking about it. Yeah. And the majority of the ruling class here, they still want to, they don't want to see, especially when it comes to what you're saying about this is genocide, this is not a war. They try to deny themselves from seeing what's actually happening. They still talk about, when it comes to our government, that this is self-defense. Yeah. They still start out with saying Hamas needs to do this. They start out with October 7th and how it all started. And I've been waiting for like at least a year now. I'm like, okay, you can't keep doing this. Oh. You will implicate yourself. And in the end, especially those ministers and part of the government, of the previous government under Scholz and Merz now, they could end up in The Hague themselves and go to prison for this, for supporting this genocide. And they know this. We have great lawyers in the government. They know this, and they still don't do anything about it, or they at least only pay lip service. Yeah. And maybe I'm too young, but like I don't understand that.
But you're not naive.
I play one here.
Well, look, I mean, I don't think they have much reason to fear that they will go to jail, for one thing.
Many people say they should.
Yeah. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying the chance that they will is very, very small, vanishingly small. I would be happy enough if the people actually did it, not those who were complicit, but the people most directly responsible, such as Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant. Those people would go to jail. In fact, I think if they don't go to jail, if they're not prosecuted, it's a catastrophe. Even if it takes 10 years, doesn't matter. But at some point, that some people would pay the price, representative people, is crucial. Because if they don't, then the whole system of international law is worth nothing. It's just empty. If you see someone murdering someone on the street and there's no way to punish them.
Then the irony is Germany is one of the founding members of the ICJ.
Yes.
And a proud founding member until now.
Now, in terms of they will be complicit, they are complicit.
Yes.
This has been from day one. Germany has been supplying Israel with arms. It may be supplying it with fewer arms now. I haven't seen sufficient information on what exactly is going on. All I've heard was that there's some problem in Israel now with tank engines, because these Israeli-made tanks have German-made engines, and tanks don't run very well if they don't have an engine. They're very heavy.
From what I know, the engines supply is still going on.
Exactly. So
and the German government would tell you, well, we told them not to use it in Gaza.
Yeah, right.
And then when you ask, like, how can you make sure that the engines are only being used in Israel or the West Bank, for example? And they will tell you, like, we don't know.
Yeah.
We just tell them, don't do it in Gaza.
Most Israeli tanks are in Gaza right now.
Exactly.
Actually. So they are complicit. And they have been from the beginning.
But they must know that this ruins, like, retrospectively. In history, like in the history books, at some point,
it is. Look, I mean,
it will ruin their
reputation for yes, I think so, and beyond that, beyond personal reputation.
Germany's reputation.
What does it mean? What does it mean for Germany, for France, for Britain, to have become facilitators of genocide? What does it mean for those countries, and what does it mean for the system that they claim to uphold? And how can they apply these non-standards to Israel and then try to apply different standards to Russia? Of course, it makes no sense. And the only way to understand it is, as we said before, first of all, because Israel has a particular historical meaning, which is completely different. Mm-hmm. And it does, I think, make it more difficult for politicians, even of younger generations, to behave toward it the way they would toward other countries. There is, and we didn't touch on that, and I think it's important to note, there is a very cynical economic, technological aspect to this, that Israel, first of all, is making huge profits during this war. Mm-hmm. It's selling its technology everywhere. I don't know if it's doubled or tripled its income from that. But also that this technology is woven together intricately with other Western technologies, American and European. There's rocket technology the European countries want now because of Russia. There's drone technologies. Yeah. And Israel is part of that system, which is partly about security, partly about money, partly about technology. And Israel, though a small country, has used its abilities in high tech to infiltrate, to become an intricate part of that, including at universities, of course, because this is not only military industries, it's where all this thinking is going on. And so the combination of know-how, money, and security is hard to beat. And the same countries that say that they won't provide arms to Israel are buying arms from Israel. Mm-hmm. Denmark is buying systems from Israel because, well, they need them for the Russians. And so that's a whole other element that is at work, has always been, but it shows you how the military-industrial project complex that President Eisenhower talked about in the 1950s is well at work right now, and what the impact of that is.
Yeah. Many German politicians, like off the record, will tell you, like, if we actually stop providing Israel with military aid and all this, they will stop providing us with their military stuff, and then we can't support Ukraine. Yeah. And then they like, okay, are you against Ukraine? Yeah. No. Well, then you have to be with Israel as well. Otherwise, you will let Ukraine die or something.
Yeah, but you're looking for consistency, and that's not part of the game. You know, and there's another important element, which is the United States, and decisions made in the White House have huge impact on European politicians, as you know. And the minute Trump came up with his plan, everybody kicked in and said, yeah, we support it. But they hadn't come up with it before until he said it. But in American politics, there are other elements that play a bigger role than in Europe. So in Europe, I would say the kind of sense of responsibility, guilt, memory of the Holocaust, not only in Germany but in other European countries, plays a much greater role than in the U.S. Mm-hmm. But in the U.S., Israeli influence is much stronger. And a lot of it is through Jewish organizations that claim to be representatives of the Jewish community, which they're not, but hold a huge amount of power. They have a lot of money, and they use that money very well in politics. And it is only now, in the last few months, that you actually see a diminishing effect of those major Jewish organizations because of the growing abhorrence of what's happening in Gaza. But up to now, many senators, representatives who were appalled by what was going on in Gaza and knowing that it was done with American arms, wouldn't speak out. Many rabbis wouldn't speak out because they were afraid that they would be fired. University presidents wouldn't speak out because their boards and donors not only wouldn't speak out, but would bring the police in to get rid of the students who were demonstrating. So this is another element where Israel, over time, succeeded in having extraordinary influence on American politics. There may be a very strange change going on, not for the first time, where you have people on the MAGA right and people on the American left who are both talking about genocide in Gaza.
They're both anti-empire. Yeah?
Anti-empire. They talk about, we don't need to spend all this money on, and they are showing moral revulsion. Only that one side has its own very good anti-Semitic credentials, and that kind of anti-Israel sentiment that is growing within the MAGA movement, within the Make America Great movement, the base of Trump, is not something that I particularly desire to see in American society, because all this use, this weaponization of anti-Semitism to shut people up, actually opens the way for real anti-Semitism to resurface, saying it's the Jews who are shutting us up. It's Israel and its Jewish supporters around the world who are shutting down free speech, academic freedom, the freedom to demonstrate. And that real type of anti-Semitism is actually on the rise.
That's especially true here in Germany as well, when media and the political class is calling anti-war protests, let's call it, which you always frame as pro-Palestinian protests or basically Hamas supporters or something like that, and they've call it's anti-Semitic and all this. This could at some point lead to people who are like, wait, we are against what's happening in Gaza. We're against a genocide, what Israeli scholars call it. If this is anti-Semitism, then I'm a proud anti-Semite. And then we are in big trouble, because then the Nazis and our right-wing extremists, we were like, well, that's what we've been saying all along.
Yeah. Exactly. And also making, there's so many ironies here, because Israel had agreements already during Oslo with the Palestinian Authority. Mm-hmm. The Palestinian Authority has symbols, state symbols. One of them is a Palestinian flag. It's an officially recognized flag, recognized by Israel. And that flag has become now something that the police would attack you for. It makes no sense. It's now described as...
It's a red triangle, Omer.
Yeah,
this is right. Hamas.
Yes, exactly. And Hamas, of course, as they're called in Israel, repeatedly, on every night newscast, Hamas are Nazis. That's how they're called. And Nazis, there's only one way to treat them.
But then again, isn't that a double standard? Because I learned you never compare anything to the Holocaust and
apart
Nazis.
from Hamas.
Oh, apart from Hamas.
In Israel, it's allowed. In Israel, it's allowed to compare your enemies to the Nazis. Now, yeah.
When you were in Germany for a few years in the 80s, I mean, you probably heard of the slogan "Never Again," and I grew up with it as well as a young student and as a German. You know, never again must Jewish people, the Jews, feel unsafe in Germany, in Europe, or anywhere in the world. Let's break it down to this. Never again wars of aggression, and never again any genocide. In the last few years, it seems to be the German ruling class is only saying one thing, which is like, okay, we must not let Jews feel unsafe in Germany, in Israel, and all this. But wars of aggression, no problem anymore. I mean, look at the Iran aggression against Iran, and when it comes to Gaza, we now see, well, this is not true anymore as well. So, were these just slogans?
So look, I heard about Never Again before I came to Germany. I grew up in Never Again. It's not a German invention.
Okay.
So Never Again means different things in different places.
Different times, maybe.
No, but I mean this Never Again. The Never Again that relates specifically to Nazism, the Holocaust, and all the other crimes. In Germany, it meant what you said it meant. But much of it became, never again German aggression, and never again persecution of Jews, and never again anti-Semitism, God forbid, and never again...
Völkermord.
Yes. In America, never again became increasingly important in the 1980s, 1990s. That's when the Holocaust becomes an important element in America, not before. And the never again of America, not right now, but over those previous decades, is combined with an understanding that the way to avoid such horrors is to teach tolerance, diversity, mutual understanding, love of your neighbor, welcoming different people, different groups into your society, and so forth. So a very liberal, humanistic type of never again. If we are like that, there'll never be another Holocaust. In Israel, never again meant exactly the opposite. In Israel, never again said all the Jews should stick together, because when they were dispersed, didn't have a state, had to rely on the other nations of the world, look what happened to them. They have to all come together, have a strong army, be proud, be well-trained, respond to any threat, and be a nation unto its own. This is a slogan that is heard a lot in Israel now, Am levadad yishkon, a people dwelling on its own. That's from the Bible. That's our lesson. Our lesson is militant, fearful, because you're always seeing the Auschwitz lurking behind the corner, aggressive, unrelenting, and the exact opposite of diverse or tolerant or anything like that. That was not in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust, when in the early years of the state, there was a general embarrassment about the Holocaust, because the notion that the Jews went like sheep to the slaughter didn't work very well for the young Israeli state. So, when I was growing up, people spoke about the Warsaw Ghetto Rebellion was the thing that you studied. You didn't study about the gas chambers. Yes, we know they went there. But the people we should know about are those who rebelled and fought with a gun in their hand. These were the terms that were used. They were what we are now, right? We now learn the lesson. We always have to carry a gun. So that was the never again of Israel. And if you think that it's all about the same event, and you draw completely different lessons using precisely the same slogan.
We got to go back to your biography, but two more things about the now. in this op-ed in the New York Times from July 2025, you said at the end, quote, "I'm deeply worried that Israel will persist on its disastrous course, remaking itself, perhaps irreversibly, into a full-blown authoritarian apartheid state." And then you said, "Such states, as history taught us, do not last." So you're saying if Israel is turning into an authoritarian state, which the West seemingly is supporting by not intervening, this actually endangers the entire state of Israel?
Yes.
The existence of Israel?
Yes, you know, we spoke earlier about can there be a binational state, right? The way I see it, if Israel is allowed to continue on this course, and we don't know right now, we're sort of in a moment when there may be just a sliver of hope of it going else in another direction. But if it continues on this, which is very likely, it will become authoritarian, violent, racist, militaristic, as well as more and more religious oppression. That will mean that it will no longer be able to present itself as a kind of beacon of democracy in the Middle East. It'll become increasingly difficult and also not very meaningful to support it. Its allies, which of course have also other interests in supporting Israel, will gradually feel increasingly uncomfortable with that being their ally, being such a country, which would be on the, for decades, the occupation was sort of hidden under all kind of language that, well, it's temporary. When you become an apartheid state, that's it. Now, the argument is that there was apartheid there for a long time, but it was just couched in different terms. But once it becomes part of the system, it'll be very hard for those countries to support it. It'll also become, I believe, impoverished. Many of the elites are leaving and will continue to leave. Younger people, better trained people, and not necessarily for political reasons, but just because they won't see much of a future in that state for themselves and for their children. They won't want to send their kids to the kind of public schools that are already in existence in Israel now, that are nationalist, that racist, that they impose religion on students. And Jewish communities around the world will also distance themselves from that state increasingly. Because Israel is now the main generator of anti-Semitism around the world. It speaks of itself as a representative of the Jews around the world. It doesn't ask them whether they want to be represented by it. But in its actions, it's obviously a very good excuse for anti-Semitism. And so Jewish communities will and are already now beginning to distance themselves from it. So what will it be? How long could it survive like that? Torn with internal intra-Jewish tensions and, of course, constant friction between Jews and Palestinians. Because Palestinians will not just live in apartheid and accept it. There will be constant resistance and constant violence. And there are 7 million on each side. So what I think may happen is that this entity will not be able to survive as such. And then there will be choices. There may be a kind of civil rights movement there. And that may transform it into another type of political entity. But it'll come at a huge cost of a great deal of violence, of suffering, of impoverishment. And there's no assurance that we would see in Israel what we saw in South Africa in 1994. And South Africa of 1994, which got rid of apartheid, is still suffering to this day from the apartheid regime. The poison that instilled in society is still there. So it's a very dire future for that state. And if anybody cares about it, they should try to help it avoid it.
Since you called what's happening in Gaza genocide, just like for clarification, there was the recent UN Commission of Inquiry who also concluded this is genocide, and they're observing 4 genocidal acts out of the 5 in the 1948 Genocide Convention. And just to see if you agree, first they say Israel is killing members of the group, killing members of the Palestinian group. They're causing serious bodily or mental harm to the group. They're deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and finally imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Do you agree with these 4 genocidal acts, or do you disagree with the UN Commission?
No, I think they're totally correct. Israel's killed large numbers of members of that group of Palestinians. The estimates, the official figure is someplace around 67,000 now. Estimates are it's much higher than that. It's well above 100,000. About 170,000 wounded, many with life-changing injuries. So you're talking about at least 250,000 people. That's just who are physically harmed. If you talk about severe physical and mental injury to people, you have to think about the children in that society. Half of the people living in Gaza are under the age of 18. What that has done to them mentally and physically, deprivation of food. Even those who don't die of hunger are children who for 2 years are being deprived of food, children who've lost their entire families, children who've been subjected to bombing on a daily basis, to the horror, to fear, to trauma. So enormous damage to that rather small population. If you talk about creating conditions, you look at Gaza today, there is nothing in Gaza. Gaza is, there are hardly any buildings standing. People are living there in tents in huge numbers. There's no humanitarian infrastructure, no medication, no clean water, not enough food, certainly not healthy food. The conditions are conducive to people dying indirectly, which is what this particular act is. They don't die because they're shot, they died because of conditions created that will lead to their destruction. And the last one that I was actually glad that the UN Commission mentioned, and what the UN Commission referred to was the destruction of fertility clinics, which is documented. And that's true. And that, of course, has to do with prevention of birth. But there's many other elements that were mentioned by Physicians for Human Rights. So there's been a rise of 300% in miscarriages since October 7th. 20% of children born are born underweight or prematurely. And they have no medical facilities, hardly any, and their mothers are undernourished and cannot feed them. Large numbers of kids have no parents at all and no other family members. Their entire families have been destroyed. So what does that mean regarding the future of that group, which is what prevention of birth is about, that the group would have a future? And the last thing I would say that I don't recall the UN Commission speaking about it, but I think it's very important. The systematic destruction of Gaza was a destruction not only of infrastructure and of homes, it was also a destruction of universities, of schools, of mosques, of museums, of archives, of everything that is needed. Let's say the war ends. The war, the demolition of Gaza, which is what it is, ends. How does that group reconstitute itself as a group when everything that it had, educational, medical facilities, and its collective memory, its archives, its museums, have all been destroyed? that is the goal. That's the intent, to destroy the group as a group, which is clearly a genocidal intent.
Let's stop it here. I'm sure there will be some follow-up questions when Hans comes.
Sure.
Let's go back to your biography. You were also part of the IDF.
Mm-hmm.
Like where did you go? The military. Like right after school, right? Because I saw you were a company commander in the Yom Kippur War.
No. I was a company commander, but not in the Yom Kippur War. That's someone got it wrong, and everybody keeps. No, I was.
Because I was like, he was 19 and already a company commander.
No, I was 21 when I was a company commander.
So you didn't fight in the Yom Kippur War?
I did, but as a soldier, not as a company commander.
You were 19 years old.
Yeah, well, I was 18 actually. I just turned 19 because it was October. I was born in April. I was conscripted November 1972, but I was in a unit that did some time in a kibbutz before. So January of 1973, I went to basic training for 4 months. And then I went to advanced training because I was in a unit that wanted more training. And I was in that unit when the war broke out in October. We were then patrolling. But we were patrolling the Jordan Valley. Mm. And so when the war broke out, we were waiting for the Jordanian army to attack. Mm-hmm. And we could hear that night, I vividly recall it, tanks were driving on their own chains along the Jordan Valley to reach the Golan Heights because the Syrian army had penetrated the Israeli defenses and was streaming toward the Sea of Galilee. Mm-hmm. But we were not attacked. The Jordanian army made two mistakes. In 1967, it attacked and lost, and in 1973, it didn't attack. When we had nothing to stop it with. We had World War II bazookas. There were no tanks. So in the war 73 itself, I was there. So I wasn't in the fighting itself. After the war, I went to NCO course, and I became a corporal, a sergeant. And then I was sent to the Syrian enclave. There was a lot of fighting going on. People don't recall all these things. Mm-hmm. Israel had captured more territory in Syria. After the Syrians attacked and almost took over the Golan Heights, the Israeli army took over that territory and more. Mm-hmm. And I spent several weeks there in a kind of bunker, basically, being shelled every day. And I'd read already, I was a fan of military history and reading about the world wars. And to me, it felt exactly like World War I because we were standing in mud. It's lava soil there, and it was winter. And there were, people were killed around us, and we were shooting at the Syrians, but we couldn't see them. They were far away. So it was really artillery duels, and we were just sitting there, sitting ducks for a few weeks.
Was your life ever in danger? Or did you?
Sure, it was in danger.
Did you endanger other people's lives?
I might have. I was firing, a machine gun. I have no idea. I was trying, mm-hmm. but I couldn't see anybody on the other side. It was too far. Our lives were in danger, of course. I mean, we were being shelled with 240 millimeter mortar shells, Soviet-made. They make a huge racket.
Were you a proud soldier, a naive soldier?
Yeah, I thought a lot about it later, Yeah, we were very naive, very stupid. That's why armies recruit young men. I mean, because they don't think about death. I mean, they joke around, they play around, and then they get killed. But one thing that interested me in that, when I later was studying the German army, was this idea that we were just fighting for each other, this idea that soldiers only fight for their buddies. I thought then, and I think today, is false.
Why?
That is, obviously when you're in a military outfit, in a military unit, yeah, I mean, you have to have confidence in your comrades in arms, and they have to have confidence in you. Otherwise, the whole thing breaks down. But we certainly we thought that we were fighting for the state. We thought that Israel was about to be overrun. We were patriotic. And that was very much part of the motivation. So it isn't that we talked about it, because we were young guys. It's embarrassing to talk like that. But clearly, this was what was in our DNA. We had internalized that in our education. That's what I wrote about the soldiers of the Wehrmacht. It's not just the Wehrmacht indoctrinated them. They went to school. They went to the youth movement. You internalize these things. You're socialized into that. And you believe in a higher cause. And so you'd rather not die, but you believe that if you die for something meaningful. And the state wants you to believe that, wants your parents to believe that, and your society to believe that, because otherwise you might think that you're just cannon fodder. When I think about it today, and I wrote a little bit about that in The Guardian, these soldiers who were dying in Gaza were dying, and the state doesn't care about them. What the state is doing has got nothing to do with a national goal, with self-defense. It's just sacrificing people. It buries them, hangs out a flag, plays some music, and then forgets about them, and doesn't care, not about them and not about their parents. There are hundreds and hundreds of Israeli troops who have been involved in all kinds of atrocities that we may never know precisely, but come back from Gaza and they're traumatized, they have PTSD, there's a rise in suicides. The state doesn't care about them, but they will become actors in Israeli society. I think of them a little bit like the Freikorps after World War I. These paramilitary units that were then the carriers of German fascism. So, yes, it was for me an experience that I think about, but I don't remember being scared. I remember people being wounded, and a driver we had who was scared because our platoon commander was wounded, but you had to take him to hospital, and for that you needed to drive in an area that was being targeted by Syrian artillery. So who wants to do that? And the driver just refused. And then one of the sergeants did it and somehow managed to escape the shell. So there was fear. I don't remember personally being fearful. I remember running to a bunker while the shelling begins, and everybody runs. You run like crazy because the shells are falling around you. But there's a kind of, you're young and there's acceleration in it, there's excitement.
How long were you in the army?
Yeah.
How long did you have to serve? Like nowadays, it's 3 years of basic training, right?
No, it's 3 years is altogether now, and then it was also 3 years. Okay. In both cases, they were about to shorten the service, but then October 6th happened in 73, and October 7th happened in 23, exactly 50 years later, right? I said 4 years because then I went to officers' course, and I had to sign up for more.
You saw yourself in becoming a professional?
No.
Why did you go to officer course?
Because I hated being mistreated by officers. And I said...
You want to become one yourself?
No, I didn't want to, and I don't think I was a particularly nasty officer. I mean, you'd have to ask my soldiers if you can find them. But I hated being pushed around. I liked being a soldier. I was young. I liked running and shooting. I was a machine gunner.
Me too.
That I liked.
Yeah, me too.
But I hated the army, the stupidity of it, the hierarchy of it. And in the army, as you know, if you were in the army...
I did German basic training.
So the higher you go, the more stupid people are. Yes. Because the smarter people leave.
Yes.
And so your generals are stupider than your brigade commanders or stupider than your battalion commanders. And there was a lot of abuse by the NCOs, by your sergeants and corporals. And I thought I might as well do it myself, which I did. And then I was also, for a while, a company commander. And it was kind of ironic because my company was in northern Sinai. And our base, the battalion, was in Gaza City. So we would go every week in our Jeep. We shared two company commanders shared one Jeep. And the other guy was a friend of mine. He's still a friend of mine. He's a retired professor at Columbia University. So we would share the Jeep to drive to the battalion command in Gaza City. And I remember Gaza at the time already being poor, congested, hopeless. And then the population was about 400,000. And now it's 2.3, or it was. Now they've killed a lot of people.
Were there any settlements yet? No.
Mine was a settlement. So what I was doing, I was creating a military settlement. I was in a unit that did that. It's called the Nachal. Noah Chalutzi Lochem. It's an acronym for Fighting Pioneering Youth, which was created in the 1950s. And so we actually established a military settlement that was then handed over to civilians. And in the handing over ceremony, I was there in my sort of A uniform. I handed it over to Menachem Begin. I still have a photo of that, because the people who moved into that settlement were from the revisionist youth movement, from Beitar. Now that doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing there, because Israel returned to Sinai and he went back to the dunes, which is where it belongs. Beautiful, beautiful dunes. And all this military settlement and barbed wire that were built and all that is gone, and good riddance. But I was part of that project.
When did you decide to leave Israel? I mean, you said half of your life you lived in Israel. Did you leave because you had the chance to become a professor in the U.S., or were there other personal reasons, if you can talk about it?
Look, there was mixed motivation. I was teaching at Tel Aviv University. I had a young family. I had a very small child.
Great life.
It was miserable because the salary was terrible. So I had to do other jobs. They have a name for it in Hebrew that comes from Russian, chalturt, to do all kind of odd jobs. I was translating all kind of garbage literature because I couldn't even afford to buy a computer. I couldn't afford to go to any conferences.
It was in the 80s?
In the 80s. Okay. And then the first Intifada broke out.
88.
In December of 87. Okay. And I was a young reserve officer. And there was a very good likelihood that I would be called up. And I very quickly realized that that was not something I wanted to do, to break the bones of Palestinian kids, which is what our Minister of Defense told us to do, Rabin.
You didn't have to serve in the Lebanon War at the beginning of the 80s?
82, no. 82, I was out of the country already.
Oh, okay. Then you came back? No.
No, sorry, no.
Lebanon was 82. And the first Intifada, 87, 88.
Correct. No, I was not. Oh, of course not. I was at Oxford at the time.
Oh,
yes.
You studied?
No. Yes. 1980 to 83.
So they couldn't call you?
I was at Oxford. Well, there was a very funny story there because I was sharing an apartment with someone who has become a very well-known Middle East historian called Ilan Pape, who is a friend of mine. And Ilan and I were two young Israeli men living in the same apartment, me writing on the Wehrmacht, he writing on Palestine. And then we heard that the war broke out. And our first instinct was, well, I mean, we have to go back, right? That's what young Israelis do. Mm-hmm. And then we wisely said, well, let's sleep on it. And the next morning, we realized that we were not going back. We realized what that war actually was, that it was just an invasion of Lebanon. And it was, of course, an attempt to change the regime in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, that for me was already a kind of moment of thinking about Israel's wars. But still, in 83, I wanted to go back to Israel. I missed my friends. I wanted to go back to the university. I established a family in Israel. And then came the Intifada. The Intifada was very clearly This was an uprising of oppressed people, and you didn't have to be that smart to understand that. And at the time, I wrote Rabin as I was very young and cheeky, and I wrote on a postcard to him that the way he was leading the Israeli army, I said, I'd just come back from doing a PhD in Oxford on the brutalization of the German army, and the way he was leading the IDF, he's putting it on the same slippery slope. And I sent it to him, and I, of course, did not expect him to respond.
You wrote a letter.
It was a postcard that was protesting the killing of a Palestinian child. Mm-hmm. But I was so angry by that killing of the child that I wrote in very small letters on the back of the postcard to him directly. So it was just a postcard with some words in the back. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the Defense Ministry, signed by Rabin, saying, how dare you compare the IDF to the Wehrmacht? So then I wrote him a letter, and I explained everything. And then I got another letter from him saying the same thing.
How dare you?
How dare you compare? Obviously, I was really angry.
You have a new pen pal.
I did. Yeah. And I think in retrospect, not because of my letter, but because Rabin understood something. He understood that this was not the right future for Israel. Because we're talking now, this is 1988. Mm-hmm. And in the early 90s, he's already involved in the Oslo Peace Accords. And had he not been assassinated in the most successful assassination, maybe in the 20th century, we would not have been perhaps where we are now. Mm-hmm. An assassination completely incited by Benjamin Netanyahu. He was the main inciter-in-chief. He has Rabin's blood on his hands. Mm-hmm. So I think he saw something. He understood something. But that was later, and I did not know about Oslo in 1988. And then I had an offer of a fellowship at Harvard. And I thought, okay, I mean, my salary is terrible. I can't do anything with my career here. I don't want to serve in the West Bank. 3 years at Harvard, that's not bad. And so I just went there. I didn't think that I would not come back, but I wasn't sure that I would. And then things opened up for me there. And I stayed and never came back.
Let's talk about your life in the U.S. At the end, I have one more question about you being an Israeli, you being a Jewish Israeli. And since you said your family is very religious or was very religious.
Oh, my grandparents.
Your parents were Zionists.
Yeah.
You were a Zionist. Yes. But it doesn't sound like you're a Zionist these days. When did you make, let's call it the switch? What happened?
Well, I mean, what happened is everything we've been talking about.
Right. Was it like a slow transformation or...
So first of all, let me say I'm not anti-Zionist, and I have.
What do you understand when? What do you mean when we talk about Zionism?
Right.
Like the establishment of the state of Israel,
no.
Or what? Palestinians these days they what they call Zionism is like the expansion of Israel.
I mean, I just wrote a book on all this called Israel, What Went Wrong?
Right.
And I tried to explain all of that there. But very briefly, I would say that if Zionism is the right of Jews to self-determine and to create a state of their own, then I'm not an anti-Zionist. I support that.
Yes.
And certainly after World War II and the Holocaust, what Jews don't have a right to do, or any other people, is to self-determine at the price of others. That they don't have a right to do, and they did that right away. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, the state of Israel, like many other states, I have to say, was born in sin. But that does not take away the right to self-determine. The second thing I would say is that what is now called Zionism in Israel, to my mind, is not Zionism. it's Jewish supremacy, it's racism, it's militarism, it's violence, it's genocide, it's messianism,
colonialism,
settler colonialism. That's not... elements of that were always in Zionism because they are always in all ethno-nationalisms. All ethno-nationalism have all these elements in them, apart from colonialism maybe, although there are also other examples of that. But what Zionism has become now is something that I absolutely cannot support and I'm vehemently opposed to. And because we talked about my father at the beginning, I'll say that I dedicated my book to my father, who died in 2016 at the age of 90, and I called him the last Zionist. Because my father, in his last years, when nobody was listening to him anymore, he was old and, he spoke about Netanyahu as the wrecker of Zionism. And I think he was right. That means that he transformed what Zionism could have been, might have been. It's not only Netanyahu, of course. It started long before him. But he transformed it into something that is hateful, that is completely insupportable, that is totally immoral, and that has to go. It has to be removed. Not the people of Israel, not the state of Israel, but the regime and the ideology has to disappear. It has to transform itself into something else, whose potential was there. There was, if you like, progressive Zionism, enlightened Zionism. Zionism begins as a movement of emancipation, of liberation, of appeal to humanitarianism. But it also was a settler colonial movement. Functionally, that's what it did. And it chose the wrong path. In 1948, when the state decided not to have a constitution with a Bill of Rights, it set itself on a path that ended up where we are.
No fixed borders.
No fixed borders, no actual equal rights. Now, it was not inevitable even then. I mean, there were moments in which things could have been changed. In the 1990s, there was talk about a state of all its citizens. And it became popular to speak like that. Nobody speaks like that now. That's where Netanyahu came in as destroying the whole notion that there can be peace, coexistence, an enlightened society, a civil society. And so in that sense, maybe I'm an idealist, but I'm also filled with sorrow and to some extent rage at what these leaders over time did to something that had a potential of creating a very different and in some ways creative and beautiful society, and made it into what it is today.
I asked the question because there's the German political class, the ruling class, they intentionally conflate Zionism with Judaism, and they basically say if you're anti-Zionist, against this form of Zionism in Israel today, you're against the existence of Israel.
Yeah, but that's nonsense. It's just empty. That's just nonsense. There are many people around the world who are proud Jews and anti-Zionist. Go to any Orthodox community in Brooklyn. It's nonsense. The largest Jewish movement party before World War II was the Bund. The Bund was vehemently anti-Zionist. So it's now the only thing that is true is that in the United States, over time, since the mid-'70s, increasingly, with the rise of the Holocaust as a kind of constitutive element in Jewish identity, linked to that was a sense of love or affiliation with the State of Israel. And so a couple of generations of Jews felt that their identity was closely linked to the Holocaust, the potential that they could have also been victims, and to the State of Israel. So in that sense, for many young Jews, when you criticize Israel, or not young now, those who were young then, when you criticize Israel, or even some young Jews now, they feel that you are criticizing, undermining their own identity. But obviously that's not the case. Obviously being Jewish and being Zionist is two different things. Zionism is a political movement. You can support it or not. But it's not an identity. It's an ideology. What Zionism did in Israel, it became, instead of being put aside, put in the archive in 1948, because it accomplished what it needed to do, it created the state, it became a state ideology. And what happens to these kind of movements when they become state ideologies is what happened to socialism when it became a state ideology. It became corrupted. And in Israel, not only did it become corrupt, but it became also an occupying ideology, the actual core of the occupation ideology. And with that, it had no choice but to become what it became.
If you have any more questions for Omer, hurry up and let Hans know. He's going to...
oh my God, it's 8:30.
He's going to come in a few minutes. I want to finally talk about... You're at Brown University, which is an Ivy League school. You're still a professor. You still teach students, although you're 71 years old.
Yeah.
How long can you teach? As long as you want?
Well, in America, you can teach as long as you're alive. And some people, I've heard, I'm actually teaching after they passed away. But in my case, I'm retiring in 2 years exactly.
Tell me about your students these days. I mean, ever since the latest... we've been talking about Gaza and all this. You're an Israeli-American professor. You teach about genocide. What do your students want from you? Besides being taught?
They want me to teach them. They want me to sit with them and talk with them and teach them and tell them things they don't know and explain to them things that they can't understand. That's what they want, and that's what I try to give them. And I've discovered that if you do that, and I've said that repeatedly after October 7th with all this attempt to shut people up and to stop the protests and all that, I said universities are institutions of learning. You come there to study. You come there to not only learn things you don't know, but also hear things that you have never thought possible. Hear things that would annoy you, that would be counter to everything you heard before. That's why you go to university. And so that's exactly what I've tried to do after October 7th. So, I teach a class. I've been teaching a class on genocide since the year 2000, so for 25 years. But last year I taught it again, and I added another week on Gaza. And I have to say that there were more students in that class than in any other class. There were over 100 students there, and it was a whole week. It was 2 lectures, and I tried to give a history in 2 lectures, which is a bit difficult, of Israel and Zionism and how the state developed, and then a very close look at what occurred after October 7th, as I understand it. And I told them, I'm telling you how I understand things. That's my interpretation of them. Not everybody has to agree with me. Now, I'm sure there were students there who did not agree with me. I can say also that I had at least one teaching assistant who is a foreigner who was afraid to come to that class because he was afraid of being targeted, maybe by one of the students, but certainly by the federal government. That he would not be able to come back to the U.S. to get a visa. So the sense of intimidation was definitely in the air. But I try to, next semester I'm teaching a class on the Holocaust and the Nakba, not for the first time. But when I taught it last time, it was in the spring of 2024. I had to open the class because it's a seminar, it's capped to 20, but there were 40 there. And some students were nervous about this, and they didn't know each other, and there were some Arab students and Jewish students and normal American students, which is something that doesn't exist. And by the end of that semester, I think, understood much more. Because when you teach a history of something and you try not to be biased, but you try to present how different people understand it, young people will run with that. They will open up. So I have not had any trouble at all, despite all the noise and all the people who are so afraid of teaching this.
No trouble with interest groups with your...
No, I mean...
With the university higher-ups and all this?
The university had my back. There are alumni who have complained, who have said I'm anti-Semitic or whatever.
Wow.
I could not care less. Look, I'm old. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm about to retire, and I'm not going to be, disciplined by bigots. But I can understand the younger people who have no job security, untenured professors, or even tenured professors who are still young and still have a career ahead of them, are afraid. And I can understand it, but I think they have to overcome that fear, because that fear is what creates the dynamic of silencing people. And when reasonable people who can impart knowledge are silent, don't talk, then the extremes take over. That's how you polarize societies, by the silence of the center.
Has there been repression attempts by the Trump government towards the Brown University? I mean, we hear about Harvard versus the Trump administration, or Columbia buckling. What about Brown?
Yeah.
They get in trouble?
Brown was under a lot of pressure from the administration, without going into too many details, was under a lot of pressure. I perceived some of it relatively directly. And then Brown reached an agreement with the administration, which released large sums of money that were being withheld from the university, which don't really belong to the government, but were being withheld by the government. But there is still a great deal of pressure, and that's happening right now. In fact, after we talk, I'm going to be at a meeting that has to deal with that. So Trump is taking a wrecking ball to American higher education, and there's no telling how far that will go. And I fear that the university as an institution, as I knew it, may be on the way out.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because, well, it's not only Trump. Let's be fair.
Right.
Partly it's because of the kind of imposition by the government on what you teach and how you teach, which is completely contrary to anything that exists in American academia. And the question is, do the universities buckle or not? But they seem to be buckling against their own rules, against their own traditions. So that's part of it. But another part is that the university is becoming more and more corporate. That the university has been infiltrated by business interests.
They want to make money.
Which give a lot of money and then want particular results. And they're not interested in history or social sciences. They're interested in engineering and high tech. And that's where the money goes. And so programs like history departments are shrinking. Graduate programs are shrinking. And so the university will change. And it doesn't matter if Trump is around or not. It's actually got nothing to do with him. And that's and the third thing, which is related and troubles me a lot, is centralization of administrations. The faculty of universities is losing its sense of self-governance. And I keep saying to my colleagues, a university is nothing without the faculty. You just have buildings. You have a president, you have some students coming in. When there's no faculty, what do? The faculty are the university. And so they have to govern it. But they have abdicated that role. And bureaucracy, does what bureaucracy does. It fills the void. It moves in. And you have presidents and provosts and deans, and they assert more and more power. And the faculty say, that's fine, I can write another book. And then one day they realize that all the decision-making power is gone. So, and that was shown.
Did you realize that yourself at some point?
Yes, I mean, I think it came out very clearly after October 7th, with the student protests, when universities clamped down on student protests and issued all kind of decrees that they had no authority to. It was not clear, why can a president say that? By what right? And you should say the presidents were acting because they were under pressure. They were under pressure by their donors, and they were under pressure by the government.
But that's why you have a president, so he doesn't buckle under pressure.
Yeah, but, you know, if they are not smart, they'll be fired. And presidents have been fired, so you have to be smart. Those who were fired were not terribly smart. That's a whole other issue. They just know. But the process is much bigger than that. The fact that the business model of the university, of these elite universities in particular, which was growing tuition. I mean, tuition now is through the roof. It's absurd. You pay $100,000.
Your students pay $100,000
for 1 year at the university. It makes no sense. Now the university will tell you, well, most of them don't pay it. Most of them get grants, and it needs blind admission and all that. But that's the tuition. So you need a lot of donors. You need to provide the students with a lot of beautiful buildings and dorms and concert halls and whatever. And you need money from the administration. And that's a model that was created in the 1950s after World War II. And it functioned quite well until the crisis came. And then you saw that these, like Brown, very liberal, open, diverse university, very proud of that. When the donors kick in and the administration kicks in, then this veil of civility and diversity suddenly is removed, and you see where the power really lies. And I don't know how to correct that, because if you really want to correct it, you need to create a different university.
But at least you can see it now.
Oh, yes. Yes.
At least it's transparent now.
At least I see it.
That's what crises are for as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure that everybody sees it. I'm involved in that. I'm trying to think my way through it myself. There's some writings on that now. But it is a major question for future generations. Because if the university that has all kind of legacies is changed in this way, this will have a major impact on certainly on democratic societies.
And finally, last question, since you worry about Israeli fascists in power and what we have to do about them, we talked about that. What about American fascism? I mean, there are fascism scholars who consider Trump and the MAGA movement a fascist movement. Do you see? Are you afraid that the American democracy, the American democratic institutions, are not strong enough to fight this undemocratic takeover attempt?
Yeah. So that's two separate issues, right? One is fascism. So Trump is being called a fascist. Putin is being called a fascist. Erdogan, Netanyahu, and so forth. Fascism is a term that has been used a little bit the way genocide has been used. It's a kind of term of abuse, of...
you should only use it when it applies.
Yeah, and we used it, in the 1960s and 70s, people disagreed with you, were automatically fascist if you were on the left. I think, obviously, there's a danger to democratic institutions. There's no doubt about that. In the United States now, there's severe danger to democracy in the United States. Severe. But I think that calling it fascist is the easy way out. It's not trying to understand what is it that is happening. I think a new type of authoritarianism and populism has appeared. It has some similarities with fascism, but it's also different. And if we try to apply fascism to it, we won't understand what it is. And that's in the United States. You see versions of it in Russia, versions of it in obviously in Hungary, in Turkey, in Israel, and each of them has its own peculiarities.
What about an American autocracy?
American autocracy is certainly on the way. Certainly, white supremacy is on the rise. Politics of violence, state violence. The U.S. has enormous, vast organizations of armed people, who are ruled by the federal government, who can descend on your community like an army. And now, of course, the army itself being called into cities. So, yes, that is certainly a danger. And the danger is not going to be confronted successfully by just saying, oh, these are fascists. You have to look at what are the alternatives and why other parties, social democrats in European countries, Democrats in the United States, are losing their voters, are losing support. Where have they gone wrong? And they are refusing to do this analysis of their own errors. And as long as they don't, then these powers are going to take over.
Omer, please come back at some point. This was a wonderful conversation. I hope our audience agrees. Hans will tell you in a second. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting us. Hans.
Hallo Omer.
Hallo.
Wir haben vorher gesagt, ja, du verstehst ganz gut Deutsch.
Ja.
Sprechen ist etwas schwieriger, weil so lange her. Ich habe gesagt, mal gucken, wir stellen Fragen auf Deutsch, wenn sie auf Deutsch gestellt wurden von den Zuschauern und du antwortest auf Englisch, okay? Die erste Frage, musst du als Professor in den USA mehr aufpassen als deine Kolleginnen und Kollegen in Deutschland, was du über Israel sagst? Oder kann man hier in Deutschland liberaler und offener sein? Wie ist deine Einschätzung?
It's also two different questions. One is me as an Israeli, and the other is in the US and in Germany. It's a bit hard for me to say whether you have to be more careful as a professor speaking about Israel in the US or Germany. I think the pressures in both countries. There are also pressures in Britain, in France. I was recently in Paris. People were telling me similar things. So I can't say for sure where it's more difficult. I suspect it's probably more difficult here because of the legacy of the Holocaust and the fear of being called anti-Semitic.
I see.
But I'm not sure. As for me as an Israeli, let me put it bluntly, I don't give a damn. I say what I think.
You can afford not to give a damn.
Yeah, I say what I think.
Yeah, okay. Easy question. Do you still have the rabbin-signed letters?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I do, in my basement.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Are you going to publish them at any point?
Well, there's not much to publish. It's just
well.
one line. But I don't
it's
know.
Rabin.
Yeah.
Okay. Imagine someone would have a one-liner signed by, let's say, Karl Marx.
Yes.
Would be something, wouldn't it? Okay. That's a nice one. Why does Israel hold such strong influence over Western leaders? Could blackmailing be a factor? The good old conspiracy theory raises its dark head.
No, I'm not. I wouldn't say blackmailing, but I would say one thing.
Yeah.
Not about Western leaders, but about the prosecutor of the ICC. And there have been a lot of information of Israeli pressure, Mossad pressure, on the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
Which is
calling the chief prosecutor an anti-Semite, like that. Yeah.
Yes. Or finding all kind of information on improper sexual behavior and then trying to discredit him. These are tricks that the Soviets were very good at, and I think the Mossad may well be engaged in them too.
Next question. Why both the media and the prevailing discourse tend to omit or silence the role of projects projects of reconciliation and cooperation that exist between Israeli and Palestinians. They do exist.
Yeah.
And in fact, they are not reported that much.
It's true, and I think it would be much better to do that. I'm engaged in one of those myself, and I'm trying to give it more attention. But as you know, in the news cycle, it's easier to go the other way and to show violence and discord rather than to present other options.
Would you see a certain pressure on media and discourse institutions not to report on that? Or do they do that out of kind of self-control?
Look, I mean, I actually think that most of the pressure that we've seen on mainstream Western media in Europe and in the US has not been not to report on the good story, but to report on the bad story. That there's been not enough reporting on the horrors in Gaza. And it's only recently that there's been a bit more reporting. The very fact that international media are not allowed in and are not making an issue out of that is, to me, scandalous. So I don't see much of the so-called mainstream media actually doing its job properly.
Do you think that the option of genocidal actions against people today is willingly risen due to the lack of concrete action against that?
Yes, I mean, if there's impunity, then the whole idea of creating a genocide convention was to prevent impunity. But if you ignore it, then you can expect that one state that gets away with it will be seen as license for other states to do the same.
Next question is in German, auf Deutsch. Worte prägen das Bewusstsein. Und wenn Begriffe undifferenziert verwendet werden, dann werden unterschiedliche Verbrechen mit demselben Begriff bezeichnet. Wie siehst du das? Ist das ein Treiber in einer falschen Radikalisierung?
Look, yes. So, as I said, I think before, the term genocide has often been abused and used as an expression of outrage rather than specifically as the crime as it's defined by the UN Convention. The same with war crimes and crimes against humanity. I think it's important to stick to particular internationally agreed upon definitions, but to avoid calling things what they are is not the way out of it. So I think you have to be precise to explain why you think something is what it is, but not to avoid using the term because you think it might be misused. And many people have refused to use the term genocide because they're afraid that it would be misused. And I think if it is that, you have to call it by its name.
Machen wir es uns manchmal zu einfach, wenn wir eine solche Schublade aufziehen oder ein solches Label drauf pappen, sagen, du Faschist, das ist Völkermord. Ist das auch eine Faulheit im Denken?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what I said earlier. I mean, you can use the term fascist, communist, anti-Semite, genocide irresponsibly. And it makes you feel good by saying that the other side is bad. But it doesn't mean that these things don't exist.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that if you use them, you're using them carefully. But don't avoid using them when you think that they apply.
A sharp knife has a small blade. but that's necessary to cut.
Exactly.
Well, another question in German. Wie sollte ein Mensch mit deutscher nationaler Herkunft und Sozialisation inklusive dem Wissen der eigenen Familie im Nazistaat, in Nazi-Deutschland, wie sollte so ein Mensch mit diesem Rucksack, mit dem historischen Rucksack, hier steht, mit der ganzen, sich zu dem Ganzen verhalten. Und ich glaube, das Ganze meint jetzt den Gaza-Krieg, das Verhalten Israels. Was sollen Deutsche da machen?
Look, as I said before, I think the notion, the Merkel notion of Staatsräson has to be not about criticizing or not criticizing Israel because of the burden of the past, whether it's your own family past or the past of your group or your nation. The burden of their past is important to recognize, but it has to be exercised in a particular way to try to make sure that those that you can influence and those that you support are not engaged in such crimes. That should be the legacy for Germany, to be a protector of human rights, not to be a protector of a state, even if it wants to defend the state that is engaged in severe breaches of human rights.
Es gibt einen Satz, den Vertreter der Bundesregierung, der letzten Bundesregierung häufig gesagt haben. Und der Satz ist, es gibt keine Sicherheit für den Staat Israel ohne einen sicheren Staat der Palästinenser.
Yeah.
Ist das richtig?
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. There will never be security for the state of Israel, and there will never be peace, but even a sense of being at home for Israelis and Palestinians, as long as there is no peace between the two of them.
Okay. So I was just got the information. I should stick to English questions because otherwise the software for the translation afterwards would get a hiccup.
Oh dear. Okay.
So sorry to those who asked in German. I'll try to translate into English. How has Zionism changed from its initial concept? Was it racist up from the very beginning?
No, I don't think so. No, Zionism was ethno-nationalist.
Yeah.
Ethno-nationalism can become racist.
But not necessarily?
But not necessarily. I mean, Zionism was greatly influenced by Polish nationalism, Ukrainian nationalism, German nationalism. All these nationalisms were ethno-nationalisms. They were nationalism of a particular ethnos. It does not necessarily lead to racism. It can. How did it change? I think that Zionism had two faces. One was emancipatory, about liberation of a persecuted minority. And the other was that in order to create a Jewish state in Palestine, you had to exercise settlement. And that settlement, which came as settler colonialism, was the other side. It was the side of removing another population. And that process of removing that other population was one that led to more and more racism, xenophobia, and so forth. And these two things are happening together at the same time in the 1920s and 30s. More Jews are being persecuted in Europe, and those who are persecuted would want to go to a Jewish state that would protect them.
Which role, that was another question, does Martin Buber play nowadays? He was an Austrian Jew who believed very much and supported the idea of a Jewish state. On the other hand, he was one who called for a good relationship, a liberal relationship with the Arabs. Is it a position which is still discussed in the philosophical world, or is he just history?
No, it's discussed by people like Omri Böhm, who was mentioned before, and others. It's not part of mainstream political discourse today. Gush Shalom, this block of peace, of the 1930s disappears after the War of 48. And as I said earlier, that whole notion, some of it coming from Buber and Korn and others, and some of it coming from socialism, from Mapam, the war really destroys that. And Israel becomes a much more statist country under Ben-Gurion. And it starts to reemerge in the 1990s and then is assassinated, basically, with the killing of Rabin. So yes, there's talk about it, but it's not part of the main discussion.
Not
in
very
Israel.
influential, I see. Well, that's a nice one. Imagine you were an Arabic Muslim migrant living in Germany. Would you stay here right now?
Well, I know some who live here and stay here, but I think it's very difficult, and that's something we didn't talk about, but I think the main difficulty is that Germany, as part of its lesson of the Holocaust, has created this notion that you have to take responsibility for the past. And it's fine if you're a German of German heritage, but if you come from Syria, why should you feel responsibility for the Nazi German past? And does that mean you can't become a German citizen? So Germany has not been able to square this circle and is having great difficulty integrating these populations. So if I wanted to live here as a Muslim, I would also be active in changing that kind of concept of what is German today.
I see. Who or what instance can stop Netanyahu?
Right now, Trump.
And in the mid-future?
Or his pacer. Could be he has a pacer. Otherwise, maybe elections, but he's trying to rig the elections.
Yeah.
So at this very moment, the only person who's been able to stop him is Trump. Not my favorite politician, but he's the only one who can stop Trump and who can stop Netanyahu, and he has, but only for a little bit.
What do you think about German weapons to Israel? Should there be a general stop on providing Israel with German weapons? The whole marine, the ships, submarines, etc., all that comes, even more than the engines for the tanks, comes from Germany. Should there be a general stop of German weapons to Israel?
Yes.
Simply
be an embargo.
Yeah.
There should be an embargo on Israel as part of...
A timed embargo or in general forever?
No, not forever. There should be an embargo as part of a campaign of pressure on Israel to change entirely its political paradigm.
Question, we have 4 or 5 more minutes. You said liberalization comes from outside, but what about inside the Israel society? If Bibi is gone again, what would happen then?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I'll say briefly that the opposition, the big opposition in Israel, has not proposed any alternative politics.
So they would support annexation and...
they may not support annexation, but they will not stop the occupation.
Would a Palestinian state be a democratic one?
Well, it would have to be.
Who could guarantee that?
That would be part of the entire project. The project has to be to create 2 democratic states. Israel is not terribly democratic now. Palestine is no state. But that would have to be, and by the way, these were the conditions in the partition resolution of 1947, 2 democratic states. Yeah.
There are exhibitions right now about October 7th, but the question taker says there have been no independent investigations. So, question to you, Omer, what do you believe about October 7th and what do you doubt?
So first of all, there must be a state inquiry of what happened, an independent state commission of inquiry. From everything we know, the event itself was a war crime and a crime against humanity that has no justification whatsoever. And I wish the people who orchestrated it could have been brought to justice. They were all assassinated, so we can't do that.
Last two questions. When you talk about the psychology of genocide, what would have happened in Israel if Israel would have lost one of the previous wars? Can you imagine that?
No, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
It was in no position to lose any war apart from the War of 1948. And in the case of the War of 1948, it's the one war that you can call a war of existence for Israel. So it really had no option of losing it. It would have not happened as a state.
Okay. So the very last question, have you ever talked to those representatives, you or your like-minded colleagues, have you ever talked to representatives of the government, I guess they mean the German governments, who doubt the thesis of genocide? Have you ever talked to them? Have you ever talked to, let's say, the Israel ambassador to Germany, Ron Proser?
Well, that's two different things. I would have loved to speak with German politicians. If they asked me, I would immediately agree to speak with them. The Israeli ambassador is just a spokesperson for Netanyahu. It's a waste of time to talk with him.
You wouldn't talk to him if he offers you a talk?
Well, I mean, I would
You know how he called you after the Spiegel interview?
I don't care about that. If he wanted to talk with me, I would not refuse, but I have no interest in talking with him. I don't even know what his views are. He's a puppet for Netanyahu, so it's not. That's of no interest to me. But with the German politician, I would be very happy to sit and talk with him as I would with American politicians.
They never invited you?
No.
Oh. Maybe there is a chance, folks. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's one book I took in here, a very thick one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know him?
Yes.
I took that because in the interview with Thilo, he said, yes, there is a certain fear and an element of radicalization when people say, they might, or opponents might in the future do the very same thing to us.
That's right.
What we do to them, so we have to be first in cruelty.
Yes.
That's exactly what he writes about the radicalization of the German people in Nazi Germany.
Yes.
He said that was an element which officers from Russia wrote home to their family, said, we have to be afraid when the Russians are coming to Germany, they will do, or the Jews, they will do the same things to us. And so that was an element of saying, so we have to fight until the very end.
And I wrote about that in Hitler's army in 1991. Yeah. Exactly that, and cited many letters by German soldiers on the Eastern Front saying exactly that. If we lose that war, they will come and do horrible things to us. Yes.
It's a horrible parallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Omer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Danke für eure Fragen. Danke für eure Unterstützung, ohne die es das Format nicht gäbe. Das wisst ihr. Wer im vergangenen Monat dabei war, jetzt im Abspann. Wir sehen uns bald wieder. Bis dahin. Tschüss.
Mike.